The air in the CBS Mornings studio was usually kept at a crisp, preservationist 68 degrees. But right now, under the high-key lighting grid, it felt stiflingly hot. There was no introduction, no montage of film clips, and no warm applause to settle the room. We are already live. We are already in the thick of it, and it is already going wrong. Gayle King sat in her signature chair wearing a bright canary yellow dress that usually signaled optimism, but her spine was stiff against the upholstery. To her left, Tony Dokoupil was leaning forward, his pen frozen halfway to his notepad, his eyebrows pulled together in a look of genuine confusion. Nate Burleson, usually the master of easy charm and athlete-to-athlete camaraderie, was shifting his weight, his smile fixed and straining at the edges. Across from them, occupying the center of the guest couch with a physicality that made the furniture look like dollhouse equipment, was Jason Momoa. He wasn't shouting, he wasn't throwing things, he was simply existing. But he was existing with an intensity that sucked the oxygen out of the room. He wore a distressed gray linen shirt unbuttoned halfway down his chest, revealing layers of beads and shark-tooth necklaces, and a heavy darker gray cardigan draped over his shoulders like a cape. His hair was loose, a dark mane framing a face that was currently doing absolutely nothing to hide his boredom. "So," Tony said, his voice just half an octave higher than usual, betraying the pressure. "I want to go back to what you just said, Jason. You mentioned that the work is the work and that everything else is just noise. But when you're on a set with $300 million on the line, surely there's a pressure to play the game, to be the hero people expect?" Jason didn't answer immediately. He picked up the mug of water on the table in front of him. His hands were enormous, covered in rings, skulls, turquoise, silver bands that clinked against the ceramic. He took a slow sip, looking over the rim at Tony. He set the mug down. The sound was a dull thud that seemed amplified in the studio silence. "Tony," Jason said, his voice a low rumble, like distant thunder. "You're asking me about money. You're asking me about expectations. You're not asking me about the art." "No." "Well, I think," Tony started. Jason cut him off, not with volume, but with a raised hand, a heavy calloused palm facing the host. "Let me finish, brother. You talk about playing the game. That's your world. You guys sit here in the suits, you read the teleprompter, you smile when the red light turns on. That's the game. I go to dark places. I build things, I bleed, and then I come here, and you ask me if I'm worried about the budget?" He leaned back, spreading his arms along the top of the couch, effectively claiming the entire visual space of the frame. "I'm not worried about the budget. I'm worried about whether the soul is there. But I don't think that's a metric you guys track on the morning news." A ripple of unease went through the floor crew. The cameramen adjusted their grips. The floor director, standing in the shadows behind camera 2, put a finger to her headset, listening to the frantic whispering from the control room. The command was simple: keep going, don't cut away. This is Trainwreck Gold. Gayle King, the veteran, the anchor, the woman who had stared down presidents and icons, decided to step in. She adjusted her glasses, her voice dropping into that soothing, authoritative register that had salvaged 1,000 awkward segments before. "Jason," she said, waiting for his eyes to slide from Tony to her. When they did, she held his gaze. "I hear what you're saying. You feel there's a disconnect between the business of Hollywood and the craft of acting. That's fair, but you are also one of the most recognizable faces on the planet right now. People look at you, kids look at you, and they see a superhero. They see a warrior. Do you feel a responsibility to that image, even if it feels heavy sometimes?" It was a good question, a safe question. It was the kind of question designed to let a celebrity pivot to a humble answer about loving the fans. Jason stared at her. He didn't blink. He reached up and scratched his beard, the sound of his rough skin against the hair audible on the lavalier mic clipped to his shirt. "Responsibility," Jason repeated, tasting the word like it was sour wine. "Gayle, look at me." "I am looking at you," she said evenly. "No, you're looking at a commodity," Jason said. He shifted his legs, his heavy boots scuffing the polished studio floor. "You're looking at ticket sales. You're looking at the guy who takes his shirt off so you can get a ratings spike. Nate tried to laugh, a short, nervous sound. Hey man, I mean, the gym routine is impressive. You can't blame people for noticing. Jason's head snapped toward Nate. The movement was fast, predatory. The laid-back aloha vibe evaporated instantly. Is that it, Nate? Jason asked softly. Is that the ceiling of the conversation? How much I bench press? Nate's smile faltered. He held up his hands in a peace gesture. No, no, I'm just saying. You're an athlete, Jason pressed, his voice hard. You played at the highest level. Did you like it when they only talked about your stats and never about your heart? Did you like it when they treated you like a racehorse? I think it's a bit different, Nate began. It's not different, Jason said, leaning forward now, elbows on his knees, invading the personal space of the coffee table. It's reductionist. I came here today to talk about the ocean. I told your producers that. I said, I want to talk about the water, about what's happening to the reefs. And we've been talking for 6 minutes, and we haven't mentioned the water once. We've talked about box office. We've talked about my workout. We've talked about my suit. He gestured vaguely at his own clothes. You're wasting my time, Nate, and you're wasting the audience's time. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a lesser host. In the control room, the executive producer was barking orders. Switch to the wide shot. Don't stay on the close-up of his eyes. He looks ready to kill someone. Tony Dokoupil, ever the journalist, decided to push back. He adjusted his cuff, his face tightening. Jason, with all due respect, Tony said, his tone sharpening. We have a format here. We cover a lot of ground. We're getting to the environmental work, but our viewers are also interested in the man. You can't be surprised that on a national morning show, people want to know about the person they see on the screen. Jason let out a long, ragged sigh. He looked up at the studio lights, shaking his head slowly, as if asking the universe why he was being subjected to this mediocrity. The man, Jason muttered. He looked back at Tony. You want to know the man? The man is tired of superficial conversations. The man is tired of explaining to people in suits why the earth is dying while they worry about commercial breaks. We care about those issues too, Gayle said, her voice firming up. She was sensing the slide. The interview was moving from difficult to hostile. She needed to regain control of the steering wheel. We have covered climate change extensively on this show. We are happy to talk about your activism. But the hostility, I have to be honest, Jason, the hostility feels misplaced. We invited you into our home here. Your home, Jason scoffed. He looked around the studio, the perfectly lit panels, the expensive cameras, the polished surfaces. This isn't a home, Gayle. This is a set. It's a cage. You guys are just the keepers. Okay, Nate said, clapping his hands together once, trying to break the tension with physical noise. Let's reset. Let's take a breath. We're all on the same team here. We all want to put good vibes out there. I don't do vibes, Jason said, looking at Nate with a mixture of pity and irritation. I do truth. And the truth is, this feels fake. I can feel the teleprompter scrolling in your heads. Nate's jaw tightened. He was a professional, but being called fake on live television by a guest was testing his limits. I'm speaking from the heart, man. I'm just trying to bridge the gap. Don't bridge it, Jason said. Jump over it. Ask me something real. Ask me something that scares you. Tony leaned in. Fine. You want something real? Gayle shot Tony a warning look, a micro-expression that screamed, don't take the bait. But Tony was already committed. You have a reputation, Tony said, his voice level but challenging, for being difficult to manage, for doing things your way or no way. We're seeing a bit of that right now. Do you think your refusal to play by the rules, the Hollywood rules, the media rules, ultimately hurts the causes you're trying to promote? Because right now, people aren't thinking about the ocean. They're thinking, why is Jason Momoa being so rude to Gayle King? The air left the room completely. It was a direct hit, a meta-commentary on the disaster unfolding in real time. Jason stared at Tony. For a second, it looked like he might smile, but he didn't. His face went frighteningly neutral. The charisma, the charm, the rugged appeal, it all vanished, replaced by a cold, imposing wall of mass. Rude, Jason said quietly. I'm asking if the tactic is effective, Tony clarified, not backing down. You think I'm being rude because I'm not dancing for you, Jason said. He pointed a finger at Tony. Tony, a finger adorned with a heavy silver skull ring. You think because I don't give you the sound bite you want, I'm the problem. You confuse obedience with politeness. It's not about obedience, Gayle interjected, her voice sharp now. The maternal warmth was gone. She was protecting her team. It's about professional courtesy. We are doing a job. You are doing a job. There is a way to have a discourse without insults. I haven't insulted anyone, Jason said, leaning back again, crossing his massive arms. I've described the situation. If you feel insulted, that's your ego talking. My ego is not the issue here, Gayle said. She shuffled her papers, a clear sign of agitation. We are trying to understand you, Jason, but every time we open a door, you slam it shut. Because you're opening the wrong doors. Jason's voice rose for the first time, not to a shout, but to a projection that rattled the coffee mugs. You're asking about the fluff. You're asking about the gossip. I'm sitting here trying to tell you that the world is burning, and you want to know if I'm happy in my personal life. It's irrelevant. It's relevant to the millions of people watching who care about you, Nate argued. They don't know me, Jason snapped, looking at the camera lens directly, breaking the fourth wall. You guys don't know me. You know the image. You know the poster. That's it. And you, he looked back at the hosts, sweeping his gaze across all three of them. You perpetuate that. You feed them the candy because it's easy. You're terrified of the vegetables. We are journalists, Tony said, his face flushing slightly. We ask questions. That is the job. Then do your job better, Jason said. The insult landed in the center of the table like a grenade. Gayle took a breath, a long, deep, measured breath through her nose. She looked at the producer standing just off camera, who was making a wrap-it-up motion with his hand across his throat. But Gayle wasn't ready to wrap it up just yet. She wanted to clarify the line that had just been crossed. Jason, Gayle said, her voice deadly calm, you are a guest in our studio. We have treated you with respect from the moment you walked in, telling us how to do our jobs, disparaging the format of this show, and dismissing our questions as fluff. It's not what we expect from a professional of your stature. Maybe you need to adjust your expectations, Jason said coolly. He picked up his water mug again, swirling the liquid. Maybe you're used to people who are desperate to be on TV. I'm not desperate, Neil. I'm here because I have a contract that says I have to do press. That's the only reason. So this is a hostage situation for you? Nate asked, incredulous. It feels like it, Jason said. I'm sitting here listening to you guys talk in circles, trying to find a headline. Jason Momoa snaps. Jason Momoa gets real. It's all just content for the machine. None of it matters. If it doesn't matter, Tony said, then why are you still sitting there? Jason froze. He looked at Tony with a newfound intensity. It was a challenge, a direct challenge. Are you asking me to leave, Tony? Jason asked softly. I'm asking why you stay if you have so much contempt for the process, Tony replied. I stay because I'm a professional, Jason said, the irony dripping from his words. Unlike this line of questioning, Gayle had heard enough. She placed her hand flat on her stack of note cards. The decision was made. It wasn't a producer's decision anymore. It was hers. Okay, Gayle said, her voice cut through the tension like a gavel. I think we've reached a point where this is no longer productive. Jason looked at her, eyebrows raised. Oh, we're done? I think we are, Gayle said. She didn't smile. She didn't offer the usual coming up next tease. She just looked at him with a disappointment that was far more withering than anger. We wanted to have a conversation, Jason, a real one. But a conversation requires two people willing to listen. And right now, I only see 3 people trying and 1 person blocking. Jason let out a short, sharp laugh. He shook his head, looking down at his boots. Wow, okay, so that's how we play it. The big bad actor won't smile, so we kick him out. Nobody is kicking you out, Nate said, trying to soften the blow, but Gayle silenced him with a glance. We are moving on, Gayle corrected. Because our audience deserves a show that is engaging and respectful. And this is neither. She turned her body away from him, pivoting toward the camera. The physical rejection was absolute. "We're going to take a break," Gayle said to the lens, her face composed but her eyes blazing. "When we come back, we'll have a look at the weather and maybe find some sunshine, because it is distinctly cloudy in here right now." Jason didn't wait for the red light to turn off. He stood up. He rose like a mountain unfolding. The sudden verticality of him was startling. He didn't look at the hosts. He didn't say goodbye. He simply adjusted his cardigan, grabbed his sunglasses from the table, and turned his back on the set. "Unbelievable," Jason muttered, loud enough for the boom mic to catch it before it was faded down. "Absolute joke." He walked off the set, his heavy boots thudding against the floor, walking right through the shot as the camera tried to pan to the commercial break graphic. He disappeared into the shadows of the studio wings, leaving the three hosts sitting in the bright, artificial light. The music swelled, the cheerful, upbeat CBS Mornings jingle, but it felt jarringly dissonant against the image on the screen. Gayle King sat perfectly still, smoothing her yellow dress. Tony Dokoupil was exhaling a breath he seemed to have been holding for 10 minutes. Nate Burleson was staring at the empty space where Jason Momoa had been, a look of pure bewilderment on his face. The screen faded to black. In the control room, the silence was absolute for 3 seconds. Then, chaos. "Did we catch the walk-off?" the director shouted. "We got it. Camera 3 had it." "Audio, did you kill his mic?" "He was already off, but the boom caught the joke," comment. On the studio floor, the atmosphere was vibrating. The commercial break was 4 minutes long. It was an eternity. Gayle took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. She didn't look at her co-hosts immediately. She looked at the floor crew, who were standing frozen, unsure if they should approach the desk. "Is he gone?" Gayle asked quietly. The floor director pressed her headset to her ear, listening to security. "He's in the green room. He's grabbing his coat. He's leaving the building." Gayle nodded. "Good." "That was—" Nate started, then trailed off. He shook his head. "I've interviewed guys in the locker room after a Super Bowl loss who were happier than that." "He came in looking for a fight," Tony said, his voice still tight. You could feel it the second he sat down. He wanted to prove a point. He wanted to show that he was above this. "He showed something, all right," Gayle said, putting her glasses back on. She looked at her reflection in the monitor. She looked composed, but inside she was furious. Not just for the disrespect, but for the waste. It was a waste of airtime, a waste of opportunity. "Are we addressing it when we come back?" Tony asked. Gayle thought for a moment. The instinct was to explain, to apologize, to smooth it over. But then she remembered the way he had looked at them, like they were insects, like they were beneath him. "No," Gayle said firmly, "we don't give it any more oxygen. We move on. He wanted to make a scene. We're not going to turn it into a miniseries." "He's going to spin this," Nate warned, "on social media. He'll say we censored him, that we wouldn't talk about the real issues." "Let him spin," Gayle said. "We have the tape. The tape doesn't lie. He wasn't censored. He was rude." 30 seconds, the floor director called out. 30 seconds back. Everyone settle. Tony straightened his tie. Nate drank from his mug, trying to wash the bad taste out of his mouth. Gayle took a deep breath, resetting her internal anchor. She was the professional. She was the captain. "Forget him," Gayle said to the men on either side of her. "Focus on the next segment. We have the chef coming up. Let's talk about food. Let's talk about something that actually nourishes people." 10 seconds. The red light on camera 1 flared to life. The upbeat music faded. Gayle King smiled. It wasn't the easy, natural smile from the top of the hour. It was the battle-hardened smile of a woman who had just walked through fire and refused to let it burn her. "Welcome back to CBS Mornings," she said, her voice smooth, steady, and utterly unbreakable. "We are moving right along on this Tuesday morning." She didn't look at the empty spot on the couch. She didn't acknowledge the ghost of the tension that still hung in the rafters. She simply did the work. But for everyone watching at home, For the millions of people who had just witnessed the slow-motion collision, the image remained. The empty cushion, the heavy silence, and the lingering question of what happens when the unstoppable force of celebrity ego meets the immovable object of journalistic dignity. The segment was over, but the internet was just getting started. Analysis of the incident. The Jason Momoa interview on CBS Mornings will likely be studied in media training courses for years to come, not as an example of what to do, but as a perfect storm of conflicting agendas. It was a failure of communication, a failure of expectation, and ultimately a failure of civility. From the very first minute, the disconnect was palpable. Jason Momoa entered the space not as a collaborator in a promotional dance, but as an adversary. His body language, the sprawling posture, the heavy sighs, the refusal to make eye contact, established a hierarchy before a single word was spoken. He was the artist. They were the shills. He was the truth teller. They were the noisemakers. What Momoa failed to recognize, however, was the resilience of the format he was attacking. Morning television is built on a bedrock of polite fiction. Everyone knows it's a performance. The guest pretends to be excited. The host pretends to be fascinated. It is a social contract designed to make the viewer feel good while drinking their coffee. By tearing up that contract, Momoa didn't look like a rebel. He looked like a bully. Gayle King's handling of the situation highlighted why she is a titan of the industry. She gave him rope. She gave him multiple off-ramps. She tried the soft approach, the firm approach, and the direct approach. When she finally pulled the plug, it wasn't an act of aggression. It was an act of boundary setting. She protected her show and her co-host from further degradation. Tony Dokoupil played the role of the pressure valve, asking the questions that needed to be asked, even when he knew they would be met with hostility. His refusal to back down on the man versus image question was the catalyst that exposed Momoa's true stance, that he believed himself to be above the very machinery that made him famous. Nate Burleson, usually the unifier, found himself with no ground to stand on. His attempts to build rapport through shared athleticism were swatted away, revealing Momoa's determination to be seen as an intellectual heavyweight, even if it meant denigrating the physical attributes that built his career. The aftermath was immediate. Twitter lit up within seconds of the feed cutting to commercial. Clips of Jason's "Do Your Job Better" comment went viral instantly, polarizing the audience. Some saw him as a hero, calling out the superficiality of mainstream media. Others saw a pampered star throwing a tantrum because he wasn't being worshipped correctly. But in the quiet of the studio, after the lights went down and the crew began to pack up, the feeling wasn't one of victory or defeat. It was exhaustion. It was the heavy realization that in the modern landscape of celebrity, the line between authenticity and arrogance is razor thin. Jason Momoa walked that line, and then he stomped all over it. The interview was meant to be a puff piece. Instead, it became a psychological drama. It peeled back the curtain not on the movie business, but on the human cost of fame, the resentment, the entitlement, and the profound loneliness of being a public figure who hates the public eye. Gayle King was right. It wasn't a conversation. It was a collision. And in the end, the only thing left on the stage was the wreckage.